Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Bradana Ranjana Jamunati Ravanachari Jamunati Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Naya Vishabhad, Padmaham, Sabha Raj, Gachaya, Haswata, CC, but AC. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Sagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar Swasti Gaur Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopida Shamakunda Radha Kota Giri Govardhan ki jai. Sri Vrindavadam ki jai. Navadvaptam ki jai. Gang Shamuna Tulasi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Go Premanandi. All glories to the Sam of the devotees, all glories to the Sam of the devotees, all glories to the Sam of the devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnu Vinaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 49, Verse 14. Shri Sukha Uvacha Ityanusmritya Svajanam Krishnam Cha Jagadishwaram Praruda Dukita Rajan Bhavatam Prapitamahi. Sri Sukha Uvacha. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, Iti, as expressed in these words, Anusmritya, remembering Swajanam, her own relatives, Krishnam, Krishna, Cha, and Jagat, of the universe, Ishvara, Supreme Lord, Prarudat, she cried loudly, Dukita, unhappy, Rajan, O King Parikshit, Bhavatam, of your good self, Prapitamahi, the great grandmother. Translation, Sukadev Goswami said, thus meditating on her family members and also on Krishna, the Lord of the universe, your great grandmother, Kunti Devi, began to cry out in grief, O king. Both Akrura, who shared Queen Kunti's distress and happiness, and the illustrious Vidura consoled the queen by reminding her of the extraordinary way her sons had taken birth. Purport, Akrura and Vidura reminded Queen Kunti that her sons were born of heavenly gods that could not be vanquished like ordinary mortals. In fact, an extraordinary victory awaited this most pious family. Text 16. The ardent affection King Dhritarashtra felt for his sons had made him act unjustly towards the Pandavas. Just before leaving, Akrura approached the king, who was seated among his friends and supporters, and related to him the message that his relatives, Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, had sent out of friendship. Akrura said, O my dear son of Vichitravirya, O enhancer of the Kuru's glory, your brother Pandu having passed away, you have now assumed the royal throne. Purport, Akrura was speaking ironically, since the young sons of Pandu should actually have been occupying the throne. Upon the death of Pandu, they were too young to immediately govern, and so were put into Dhritarashtra's care, but now sufficient time had passed, and their legitimate rights should have been recognized. By religiously protecting the earth, delighting your subjects with your noble character, and treating all your relatives equally, you will surely achieve success and glory. Purport, Akrura told Dhritarashtra that even though he had usurped the throne, if he now ruled according to the principles of Dharma and behaved properly, he could be successful. If you act otherwise, however, people will condemn you in this world, and in the next life you will enter the darkness of hell. Remain equally disposed, therefore, towards Pandu's sons and your own. Purport, Dhritarashtra's whole problem was his excessive attachment to his nasty sons. That was the fatal flaw that caused his downfall. There was no lack of good advice from all sides, and Dhritarashtra even admitted that the advice was sound, but he could not follow it. One can have clear, practical intelligence when the mind and heart are pure. In this world, no one has any permanent relationship with anyone else, O king. We cannot stay forever, even with our own body, what to speak of our wife, children, and the rest. Every creature is born alone and dies alone, and alone one experiences the just rewards of his good and evil deeds. Purport, the term anu bhunkte is significant here. Bhunkte means living being experiences, and anu means following or in sequence. In other words, we experience happiness and distress according to the moral and spiritual quality of our activities. We are responsible for what we do. Dhritarashtra was falsely and obsessively attached to his evil-minded sons, forgetting that he alone would have to suffer for his imprudent behavior. So, Kunti Devi here had finished her praise of Krishna, and then she begins to weep or cry, very loudly actually, prarudat, out of sorrow. One, of course, because of separation from Krishna, and two, because of the condition of her own sons in the house of the Kurus. And then Akrura speaks to Dhritarashtra And of course, we have many people speaking to Dhritarashtra. Vidura speaks to Dhritarashtra also. And they all give very, very wise words when they speak to him. Of course, Vidura spoke much later. But here, Akrura is also trying to give good counsel to him. Also very wise words. And he analyzes the situation very nicely in terms of one, attachment of Dhritarashtra, father to sons, etc. And also temporary nature of these attachments. The attachment itself is not so good, but then again, it's very temporary, so it's also ultimately meaningless. However, we also know that within the material world, when we talk about this, people really don't understand, because there's no alternative to this. The only pleasure they get out of life is through such attachments. So you tell them to give up that, and then they got nothing. Simply to present the negative picture, of course, is not the final solution, but in this case, it is also a good means of, trying to bring about a realization to Dhritarashtra. Unfortunately, of course, Dhritarashtra is rather thick-headed, or I can say his attachment is too strong, so he does not listen to good advice. Nevertheless, Akrura tries to do that. All right? We see later, of course, that Vidura did the same thing, and then he got kicked out of the palace. And even after that, Vidura came back after the Battle of Kurukshetra, and he tried to advise Dhritarashtra. At that time, Dhritarashtra listened. Why? Because all of his sons had been killed. He kind of learned his lesson, and everything that had come true, all the attachments were finished. He didn't have anything. He didn't have a sons, he didn't have a kingdom, didn't have anything. So then he listened to Vidura at that time. But when we're in a comfortable position, we tend not to think of all these things. Just as we say, as long as you're comfortable, you don't think of God, but when you're in distress, then you go to the church or you go to the temple and pray. So this is the case here also. Now he's in a position of power, and he puts his son in a position of power because the Pandavas were very young when their father died. So therefore, he got control of the kingdom, so now he doesn't want to give it up, and he's very comfortable in this position. Of course, we cannot say that in one sense, from normal point of view, that the Dhritarashtra and his sons were evil in the ordinary sense of the term, because you hear descriptions of how Duryodhana was actually ruling at one time, and in one sense it was dharmic and whatever. He wasn't, excessively exploiting everybody as we see someone like King Vena would do, or some of the evil king. And so he was, in one sense, following some sort of dharma. But the fault of all of them, of course, was that they were not devotees of Krishna. They wouldn't listen to him, they wouldn't listen to any devotee. And that we'll see in this case. He doesn't listen to Akrura, doesn't listen to Vidura, doesn't listen to anyone. So they may have some good qualities, but then because of this bad quality, they reject the Supreme Lord, and then all sorts of other bad qualities manifest, such as envy and hatred and anger and whatever, unduly against the devotees, the Pandavas particularly. So therefore that's the real bad quality of all of them. And of course, as Prabhupada remarks in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, Dhritarashtra was blind, but he was not only materially blind, he was spiritually blind. So he didn't recognize Supreme Lord and whatever. Here, Akrura tries to give his advice to him, and he does that by not harshly presenting the case, but doing it in a rather neutral way, praising him, etc., and saying, well, you can rule. Of course, he shouldn't be ruling. You should give it to the Pandavas, but you can rule, but do it in a very dharmic way, which is pleasing to all the citizens. And you're a noble person, so we expect you to do this. So he's giving him some praise and hoping that he will rule very nicely. And then he presents the opposite case, that if you don't rule nicely, then ultimately people will condemn you and you get ill fame, and after you die, everyone will simply criticize you, whatever. So what is the use of that? And then you go to hell or whatever. So you have to treat the Pandavas equally, and then you won't be subject to criticism. And then he gets into the philosophical aspect. Everybody dies. Everything is temporary. No relationship is permanent. So this is, of course, a very common theme we'll find in many speeches of many personalities. They talk about this, how we meet and we separate like twigs in the water. They come together and they hit each other, then they go apart like this. And so randomly people meet for some time, and then they separate. Necessarily at death, one dies, the other dies, or whatever. So that's inevitable. And within lifetime itself, due to circumstances, people get separated. And then again, it may be accidental or whatever circumstance, and it may be deliberate. The relationship is finished. They don't have any attraction anymore. So there's all sorts of ways in which these relationships are temporary. Yet it happens in every life. And why is that? Because that's where the rasa is. So when Bharat Muni talks about rasa in the material world in terms of relationships, it's relationships between people. They get a certain rasa, a certain pleasure, a certain taste is there in these different relationships that they have. And it's with people. It's not with things. We don't have rasa with a table or a chair or a car, technically. We have rasas with people. So Bharat Muni's depicted rasa in terms of a relationship between different types of people. And there's the positive rasas like Madhurya rasa or Dasya rasa and whatever, Santa rasa, etc. But it's basically between people. And that is where they get some life or some pleasure, enjoyment. So because of that, plus the temporary nature and imperfection of human relationships, the rasa is interrupted. And then we get problems. And then we get the negative rasas, lamentation, fear, etc., which are very prominent also. In fact, in Bharat Muni's system, the secondary rasas, which are the negative ones, become more prominent. And they present the real world, so to speak, by showing how relationships are bound to fail, or people cheat on each other, and people get angry, etc. People develop fear, and all these things. So this is the result of imperfection of the relationships in this world. First, they have attachment, then there is frustration of the attachment somehow or other, due to other person or due to death or something like that, and we get problems. So this is an eternal situation. And though Bharat Muni has presented this in rasa, and this is how dramas are constructed based on the relationships and the opposing factors and whatever, it is common throughout the world. And therefore we see that in Shakespeare. We have Romeo and Juliet, and then interruption, tragedy, etc. like this. So it is a universal phenomenon that takes place everywhere in the world. Everyone lives, everyone dies, and the rasa relationships get interrupted and they have to lament. And that creates tragedy. So it is a universal experience for the human being. But why this thing becomes most prominent is because this is the center of their life. This is how they get, this is why they live. They live for these relationships. And then they get interrupted, then life becomes meaningless, so to speak. So that is there in the world, but then, of course, within the spiritual culture of the Vedas, this all takes a very secondary role. It's not just presented as such and then this is life finished. It's all presented as rejectable, the whole thing. This type of life is completely rejectable. This type of rasa is useless. Not that it's only rasa, but then we can't do anything about it because there's lamentation. And that's the pessimistic point of view, atheistic point. But we have, of course, within Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Devotion, that there's the other rasa with the Supreme Lord, that produces eternal pleasure, eternal enjoyment. Where we don't have to suffer after the relationship is established because Krishna is perfect, the devotee in perfection and prema is perfect, and they have eternal spiritual bodies in the spiritual world. So there's no problem for having eternal bliss in that relationship. So that is the real rasa. This is what we call the spiritual rasa, as compared to the material one. So that should actually be the goal of the human being, not the material rasa, which is bound to give frustration. But if we don't believe in Supreme Lord, then obviously we're not going to accept that rasa at all, and we'll keep trying in the material world. So that is what Akura says here, that we time after time we're born in the material world and we try to enjoy. And why? And of course in the word used here is anubhunkte. So bhunkte comes from the idea of enjoyment. Boga means enjoyment, or bhunkte means enjoyment. Anu means continual enjoyment, or repeated enjoyment. So we try to do this repeatedly in the material world because we have great ignorance, attachment to a material body, and then we die. Then we're born again, and we forget the previous experience, and we try to do the same thing again. And then we die, and we're born again. We forget the previous experience, and we try to do the same thing again. That's called chewing the chewed. So this happens repeatedly in the material world. Of course, the bhunkte has a meaning, enjoyment, but it also has the opposite meaning, suffering. So you enjoy suffering in the Vedic language. It's just hard to say. So another meaning is experience, not enjoyment. You enjoy and suffer. You get experiences repeatedly in the material world in one lifetime, next lifetime, next lifetime, next lifetime. All this. And it is ultimately frustrating because of this temporary nature of the rasas involved. But if we don't accept the Supreme Lord, then that's all we have. So Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana don't accept the Supreme Lord. So this is all they got. Dhritarashtra trying to shower affection on his sons by supporting them over the Pandavas. And therefore he has to support his sons and nourish that relationship, he has to persecute the Pandavas and do unjust things to them in pursuance of his rasa. Of course, this rasa of affection for his sons, which is a type of vatsalya, material vatsalya, is so strong that it produces the opposite for the Pandavas, hatred. If he has affection for his sons, then he must hate the Pandavas because they're a threat to his sons. And then this we can say this secondary rasa, the hatred rasa, becomes very strong. It becomes so strong that it produces a whole war, the Kurukshetra war ultimately, in which millions and millions of people die. So that is the nature of this attachment in the world. And how did that arise, that hatred? Because of that attachment to his sons. And why that arose is because he doesn't have anywhere else to put his attachment. Doesn't accept the Supreme Lord. So, Akura actually speaks quite wisely here about the nature of the human being and his attachments, etc. And he also raises this whole idea that your actions will produce results. That is, the law of karma will operate also. So you try to enjoy in this material world, but you have to be very careful in what type of activities you do, because the quality of those activities produce your next lifetime. So, in other words, he introduces the idea of karma and dharma, that you have to follow dharma. If you follow dharma in your acts, then you're guaranteed to get good results in your next lifetime, not suffering. And if you do sinful activities or adharma, then you must suffer. Yeah? So this, of course, is a very common principle. So we accept the idea of rebirth. We also accept the idea of law of karma operating within that for everyone. And even people like Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, though they don't accept Krishna, the Supreme Lord, this much they will accept. Even we see that Hiranyakasipu accepts this also. And he preaches like this to the wives of Hiranyaksha. Don't lament like this, this temporary material existence, whatever. We're actually Atma, all this. So this in other places explained that even the demons, at least the Vedic demons, they accept the soul at least. But then that's not such a big thing also, because we see that even Sankhya, which is atheistic philosophy, they accepts the soul also. They don't accept God, but they accept an Atma at least. So there are even atheistic philosophies that accept the soul or whatever. And for that reason, of course, accepting the soul is also related to Brahman. So then impersonalism goes quite nicely together with demons. Will accept impersonal aspect, they won't accept personal God, that is Krishna. They accept something impersonal, fine, but not that form of a Lord, Vishnu or Krishna or whatever. So Hiranyakasipu, yes, okay, we accept this impersonal Atma, Brahman, etc., but we do not accept Vishnu, that form. We don't accept Nrsimhadev. This is all Maya, material bodies. And for that reason also Prahlad, he condemns himself. I'm born in a family of these asuras, and they're all impersonalists, so I'm affected by this impersonalism also. So I only have Jnana Bhakti, Jnana Mr. Bhakti. He criticizes himself because I'm influenced by this impersonalism of my father or whatever like that. So even the demons can accept the idea of soul going on, etc., birth after birth. When it's convenient for them, at least. But harder to accept, of course, is that law of karma. So even though it is presented here by Akura, yes, your deeds are going to lead in the future to bad results if it's adharmic. He won't listen to that part. But that's actually an important feature of being born again and again and again, birth after birth. The two things are inevitably related as far as religion. So the Buddhists have the idea also with karma and life after life. The Jains, the Sikhs, and the Hindus or whatever, Vedic followers of the Vedas, they all have this concept. And even Shankaracharya will have the same idea. It's not just birth after birth, but you also have to have the law of karma. And this determines your next birth. So therefore there's an emphasis upon avoiding sin and doing punyas. Avoid the papa and do punyas. And this is what dharma is. So at least you follow dharma, and then you have a good life for yourself. And the benefit of that is, in terms of this situation, is if you follow dharma, then the Pandavas don't suffer. If you follow adharma, then you make them suffer and you try to kill them or poison them or whatever, then it's adharma, and then you suffer in your future life. So, in other words, you have to take responsibility for your activities now because of future results. Now, why the demons don't listen to that is because, generally, they can't, they have no patience to accept long-term goal. Oh, well, that's next life. Oh, we don't care about that. We want now, this lifetime. They want to enjoy now. Yes, okay, next lifetime, but no, we want to enjoy now. So therefore they don't listen to this, and they try to get their enjoyment now, even if it means doing the sinful activity. What happens after that? You don't worry about that. So in other words, this desire for the material enjoyment based on their bodily identification is so strong that they reject this concept of karma and responsibility for their activities, and they try to limit it to this lifetime. So within this lifetime, they can play around a little bit with the law of karma and think it's not operating. So they can do all these bad activities, Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, and still they're in power, and they stay in power, and they say, oh, okay, doesn't matter, we can do all this, we can try to kill the Pandavas, and still we can stay in power. Look, nothing's happening. So they're always challenging this law of karma in their life, and then they have further belief it does not work because, look, we're still in power. We're still in power. So this is the illusion that they're in. But we see that ultimately they did fail. And Duryodhana and his brothers were killed, and Dhritarashtra lost everything because of this great foolishness. He didn't listen. So he should have been responsible for his activities even for this lifetime, but he wasn't. So he ended up living in the palace of the Pandavas, and all of his sons were gone. And that was worse even, humiliation, great humiliation, because as a kshatriya you shouldn't do that, You should, fight in battle or whatever, or leave the house and not take support from anyone, etc. But he was living in the house of Pandavas. So very shameful existence he ended up at the end of his life. So that was the ultimate result of his activities in this lifetime, and didn't even have to wait for the next lifetime. This lifetime he got this very, very bad result. So that's how he learned. The sons couldn't learn because they got killed. That was it. But he was left all by himself afterwards, and then he had to experience this. Then finally he accepted, yes, all these attachments are useless. And then he left the palace and went off to do austerities in the forest. But at this time here, he's very happily sitting on the throne, and his sons are supporting him, and he's supporting his son. So you won't listen to it. So this is the extent of material identification, ignorance, attachment, etc., and what it does to a person. They don't listen to good advice.
Usually you find this material world, and people in distress, when they have this problem, they think of the Lord. Like in the aeroplane, the pilot says, fasten your seatbelt, engine is in problem. Everybody starts praying.
Yeah.
And this increases when they have a health problem, and when they're in a normal situation, they don't apply it.
Yeah.
So this is the common thing, and I find even devotees having the same.
Well, that's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, 4 types of people approach me: those in distress, those that want some monetary gain, those are inquisitive, and those are gyanis. But the last 2 are the rare ones. The most common ones is the people who are suffering and those in want money. So common feature of this material world. So they may be devotees of sort, but it's all mixed devotion, mixed with material desires.
Manasushi, in the case of Dhritarashtra, this Akrura instructed, and Vidura as well as Vyasdeva also came to pacify him that not to have war. But still, he could not accept. Even Krishna also instructed him. He could not accept the instruction. So what we can learn from this actually?
Well, what we learn is that the attachment, family attachment, is so great they will not even listen to the Supreme Lord if he comes personally. In fact, they tried to trick Krishna when he came personally, and they tried to capture him even. That was the extent of their foolishness because of this attachment. So we can say that material ignorance and attachment to family members is so strong that we become blind. Even if the Lord personally appears, we don't listen, we don't see him. That's the extent of Maya.
So, see, here we see that Maya is more stronger than the Lord himself. Yeah,
well,
Lord himself instructed, still, his Maya is overpowering Lord energy.
Yeah. The Lord, for all the demons fight with the Lord. They don't see the Lord actually, the beautiful features of the Lord when different demons are killed by Krishna. They don't appreciate. They see they're covered by Maya. So their ignorance is so strong that they can't really see the Lord, even if the Lord is there.
Now, in the case of Dhritarashtra Maharaj, although Dhritarashtra knew that what he was doing actually is wrong, but still he was not able to rectify himself because of the attachment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even the material also we see that the devotees even sometimes, they know what others are doing wrong. Still because of attachment they cannot, rectify themselves. No, I love him, that person. He knows that he is wrong.
Yeah.
But then what kind of disattachment we say?
With devotees.
Yeah, devotee.
Because we're going through anartha nivritti, then at that stage, there's a struggle between attachment to Krishna and attachment to Maya. And sometimes the attachment to Maya is stronger. If you get past Nishta and Ruchi, etc., then attachment to the Lord is more. And it's less likely to happen that one becomes attached to Maya.
Because when this situation comes, that person lose the sense of justification. He lose this completely. He said he doesn't know what he's doing. He might be thinking, I think what I'm doing is right.
Yeah, so that's bewilderment, as we see. One becomes attached, then one loses intelligence, and he becomes bewildered, and then he falls into the material world. So explained in Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
Meditation on sense objects, and then lust, anger, etc. arise.
We see that at the end, Dhritarashtra, after living with the Pandavas, he didn't give up his vengeance. The vengeance was there still as a trace in him. So he tried to crush Bhima like a pillar, crushing a pillar.
Yeah.
So that sort of vengeance, why is that it is there with the people even after having so much of experience? So much
That
of
ignorance again. It's only after Vidura came and spoke to him at the very end, then he left the palace completely and he went off to the forest with his wife and they did austerities.
Rather than his inability to do anything in the forest, or because he was deprived of even an iota of power, he became very humble. Till that time he didn't.
Well, of course, he lost everything, but still he was sitting in the palace, and then Vidura came and spoke to him and said, this is a useless situation, your attachment to your sons is useless, etc. And he gave him some spiritual instructions that all this attachment to family members is useless, etc. And he finally listened. And then he left the palace and he went off and did austerities in the forest.
And again, talking about Maya's abilities, we can never say that Maya is can act more powerful than Krishna. Rather, the Atma is giving in for the Maya's force.
Yeah, it's Maya's attraction. It's not that it's stronger. Maya is strong because the jiva is in great ignorance and he wants to enjoy without the Lord. Therefore, Maya is strong. And if one accepts the Lord, Maya becomes weaker. And if we 100% accept the Lord, then there's no Maya. Huh? Yeah, ego, ignorance, whatever, attachment, identity with his family members, material rasa, all this go together.
We see, Maharaj, in the case of Vidura instructing Dhritarashtra, actually, I was reading a few days ago, this Vidura almost insulted Dhritarashtra, that you are like a dog.
Yeah.
That only hit him. I am a dog. You are taking the remnants of others.
Yeah.
That is especially Bhima, who killed your 100th son.
Yeah.
That, really, that opened his eyes.
Yeah. Of course, in Mahabharata, he gives them a whole discourse also.
Power only little bit is there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what Vidura did. And actually, Dhritarashtra couldn't do anything. He had no position at all. Previously, when Vidura tried, he kicked him out of the palace. But this time he couldn't do anything because he wasn't in control.